And again, we're just talking here about software approvals, and it sounds really easy until you actually ever try to do it. Getting software approved for your organization, or getting your company to check to make sure that it doesn't have malware, all these things. Again, this is what we'll be talking about today. So again, I'm Stuart Phillips. I'm here out of Seattle, Washington, and I am the technical marketing manager, which means I'm the technical guy on the marketing team. And I'm focused on integrations and working with our partners and also some of our, AI solutions. But I'd also like to introduce Patrick. Patrick, who's muted.
Of course, that's how we have to start the webinar. Anyway, my name is Patrick Enderby. I'm a senior product marketing manager here at ReversingLabs. I cover our generally our Spectra Assure product for enterprise buyers. And then, as Stuart mentioned, I'm just his counterpart, and I'm not as cool as him, and not from Seattle, but I am from Portland, Oregon.
Portland
Uh,
is
the,
cooler. Portland is like the weird Austin vibe.
exactly. Well, I think it's Portlandia says it's where the '90s still lives on. So that's where I live. But yeah, glad to see that we got some people from Tennessee and St. Louis in the chat. So excited
Yeah.
to get going.
Great to have everybody here. So we're going to start on the agenda, real straightforward. We're going to talk about the state of software, complexity, software risk takes many forms, binary analysis, how that works, automating within your workflows. So if you're working with ServiceNow, Jira, however you're doing it, how your best way to integrate with that, and then some of the key takeaways and things that we think are going to help you in the future. We'll just jump right into it.
All righty. Yeah. So as you guys know, I mean, even Gartner is pointing it out. By 2028, 80% of organizations worldwide will experience some sort of attack on their supply chain, and that's a 48% increase over 2024. We've kind of understood now that the vast majority of breaches nowadays are from third-party software. People either manipulating or tampering with software, OSS packages, dependencies, using APIs, etc. Right? So there's a lot of vulnerabilities that occur from third-party software nowadays, and we noticed that there's a large uptick in that being the increased attack target for malicious intent. And the next
Yeah.
slide for me, or do you want to add something?
No, I was just going to say, we're seeing all these attacks in GitHub repos, right? And all these vulnerabilities, a lot of people, that seems to be new to me. That seems, I mean, that's always happened before, but it just seems to be now to be common.
Yeah, exactly. And then one of your guys' colleagues, Pat Opet, he's the chief or the CISO over at GPMC. Uh, he basically wrote an open letter basically saying, hey, supply chain risk is growing. We've seen the signs firsthand over the past 3 years, and providers are experiencing a number of incidents and environments. It's a great letter to read. It's also a good way to kind of establish like what a larger organization is doing to combat that. So
Mhm.
definitely a great piece to read.
Yeah, and I thought it was really interesting you don't really see that, an actual call out in public.
Oh,
I mean,
definitely.
you get threatening letters from, it's never happened to me, but I'm sure some companies have gotten threatening letters from vendors. But it's always usually private. This was like sort of admitting that they're having a big problem, and I thought that was the really interesting part about this.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, and not only CISOs are taking notice, but our governments are taking notice,
Yeah,
right?
and
So there are a ton of regulations around this coming in, and it's coming from all angles, right? So it's both from the software vendor responsibilities for the folks who are producing software, and then also people who are purchasing and deploying software, right? So, for example, on the software vendor side, we have CISA, Secure by Design, right? Shifts the burden from onto the software vendors, right? Producing safe code, et cetera. And we have the Cyber Resilience Act, and then the Product Liability Directive from the EU. And then we also have the Software Security Code Practice from the UK. And then on the enterprise side, we have DORA. Obviously, it's a very big kind of thing going on in Europe, right? So organizations must monitor and remediate third party risk, right? We have NIS2, which is in the EU, right? So they must control their security supply chains. And then we even have the memo M26Q, I think it's O5, sorry, US, where
Mhm.
organizations are ultimately responsible for assuring the security and software on their networks. So that's a very important distinction now going forward, because that means that no longer you can blame, that app that was in your network that was bad. It's you are now responsible for it,
Yeah,
which is the challenge.
it is a challenge.
So, software risk, let's kind of talk about it. It comes in many forms, right? So, in the recent publication from Gartner, as I kind of mentioned earlier, there's two kinds of supply chain risks. Supply chain risks that typically associated with third-party software. One, right, backdoor malware implanted externally in externally procured software. And then also there's known vulnerabilities in third-party or open source dependencies, right? So, for example, maybe, I mean, one example would be like a open source package that has a crypto miner in it, right? That is a pretty common example as well. And then obviously, how can companies address these risks? Gartner basically is recommending collaborating with security and compliance stakeholders to review third-party software prior to implementation. That's kind of what we're talking about today, right? It's that setting up that security control up front so you avoid these problems later.
Yeah, and I think again we talk a lot about the idea that, having policies and procedures and dealing with it up front is a lot better than trying to fix it later, which is always it's just true in every aspect of cybersecurity.
Oh, 100%. The only thing that sucks is sometimes you tend to have to be the bad guy, which is not
Yeah,
ever fun, but we're going to
yeah.
show how to make that a little bit easier potentially as well.
Well, I think,
So
and again, this is one of the biggest problems. I have a cybersecurity person working on software side in that situation, dealing with customers who are saying have to go to their leadership and say, "No, I know we were planning to move to this new platform, but we can't. Let me show you why."
exactly.
And not exactly. And there's nothing worse than crushing some executive's dreams, right? And then but again, the whole point is to have backup, to have evidence, to have receipts, as my grandson would say. And so again, it's the idea of being able to document what you do.
Yeah. And so obviously, like one of the things that we've had historically challenging to do this, right, is there's things that are barriers even to being able to accomplish this, right? So, for example, right to audit not present in software vendor contract, right? So you might not be able to audit it from a contract standpoint. You might have limited time or skilled resources to perform the assessment, right? So maybe your security team is very small. It's very hard to do a security audit or a pen test or maybe running through an EDR platform, all for a security professional for all of the volume of software that you guys want to acquire. Especially, I know that AI agents are really popular right now. How do you scan all of those in a timely manner, right? Maybe the supplier is unwilling to provide evidence of control effectiveness, right? So maybe they won't provide an SBOM as an example, or they won't even provide you answers to your questionnaire that you sent them, right? And then also security testing, generally kind of expensive, right? Pen testing or source code analysis, it's very invasive and also very expensive to do. So maybe you're not doing it for all of your applications. Maybe you're only doing business critical applications, right? And then lastly, assessment scalability issues, right? So basically, the manual nature of testing currently is tough to where you can't scan the volume, right? So, for example, every employee at a Fortune 500 company is requesting software at least once a year, right? So, for example, maybe someone from the marketing team is requesting a Grammarly plugin, right? Or the salesperson is requesting something like a Gong add-on, right? Or something like that, right? Or an AI note assistant. So it's those things that are constantly kind of inundating these security teams in terms of like, hey, are these safe to be using in our network?
Right. And again, I think one of the biggest challenges we talk about is it's really hard to assess like what's critical software, what's not critical software, because nobody has any perspective, right? Everybody's, is this a 1 to 10? And everybody's, oh, this is a 12. And the second thing is it's hard to gauge like how, you know, is it half of my marketing team wants this one software, or is it one person that wants this, or this kind of thing. So these again, all these challenges come into you as when you're trying to do these things.
Yeah. So obviously we're going to introduce a new control, right? So it's binary analysis. So Stuart, do you want to explain binary analysis for the
Sure.
folks?
So binary analysis is examining a file in state. So you typically have two types, there are a couple main types of analysis. Complex binary analysis is looking at a file, but it also includes a lot of things like such as, for example, uh, unpacking the file. So if the file's been encrypted, if the file has been compressed, if have these different types of packing that go on. So we actually support like 50 different types of unpacking. So if we take a file and unpack it, break it into its components, it's then hashing the files, looking at the components of the file itself to look for, suspicious behavior, weird characteristics, or if it looks very similar to previous malware. And so, what binary analysis has the advantage of being very fast and very scalable. And so it's not constrained by resources. You can always add more to it and then be able to support, more and more. So we have customers who are doing 1 million files a day, complex binary analysis. What we're actually looking for, is really straightforward, right? Malware, which is the obvious thing. If someone's embedded a crypto miner or some sort of malware inside the program, tampering, which is what we're saying when people say, "Oh, this GitHub was copied and altered." That's what we refer to as tampering. Vulnerabilities are more where they're typically using older software, so they're using we had this the other day. Someone was using a very old version of OpenSSH, and it's like, why are you using software from the 90s? And it's like, well, we don't need to fix it. It's like, well, okay, I understand you don't need to fix it, but you actually do need to fix it. Hardening is something we talk about, but it's different, and we look for a lack of hardening. So, for example, if all the ports are open on this application, or if there's no controls around entering, looking at how they've set it up, if they're looking at seeing it that they have not sufficiently protected the software. Again, a lack of hardening is something that we look for, and that's usually a sign of poor software development. Secrets are pretty straightforward. That's where they've embedded passwords. They've embedded information. We see this a lot on the AI agent side, where they've actually put their API, keys directly into the agent for the back end. So, you have an agent, but it's actually talking to Claude. And if you look in the software, you can see the Claude API key. That's bad for them. It's actually bad for you because it allows people to hijack the sessions and, take over your software. And so, and feed you and potentially corrupt what you're doing, poisoning what you're doing. Licenses, again, very straightforward, but that's where you see actual keys and everything in there. Licenses should not be embedded in software because they expire. It's actually, again, some of these are hacker activity, some of these are just poor software. And if you're buying poor software, you should know, right? That if someone is not great at writing software, you should know that, and then it should be feedback to give them. So if someone's embedding all their licenses in there, again, licenses expire, and you don't want to be called at home at 4 o'clock in the morning to say, "Hey, the CRM is offline. We can't figure out why, and we can't get hold of the vendor." Um, and XBOM is something we've been, working heavily on. It's an extension of SBOM, of course, software bill of materials, but also now SASBOM, CBOM, and MLBOM. CBOM being cryptography being important because of a lot of us keep thinking about quantum day, right? This idea that in the near future, encryption, a lot of encryption that we use will be breakable, and so you really want to know, does this software have encryption that you'll have to replace in the future. And then, of course, ML bomb, using with machine learning, what AI agents are you using? Um, Again, if you're a U.S. government defense contractor, you don't necessarily want to be using some, you know, Chinese agent, software technology from a company that no one's ever heard of. That's goes to a PO box in Shenzhen.
Yeah.
So, just things to worry about. Again, there's a lot to worry about here and a lot to think about here. And this is where it becomes really challenging because most of the time, You're just looking for malware, but at the same time, all these other things are actually even more important. And sorry, Patrick, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah, I mean, the cool thing about this technology, right, is that it can be used on every type of software, right? So it can be used
Mhm.
on proprietary stuff, so stuff you're developing in-house to check, right? So maybe, I'm not saying everybody's doing it, but people are doing AI coding, right? So how do you know that that your AI Claude or whatever is producing is safe, right? You have commercial software, right? So this is one of the advantages of this. You can verify what people are selling you now, right? So it's no longer a guessing game or I trust big name vendor anymore. You can actually scan that software. And then you have the open source communities, right? So we even have our own community that has a bunch of safe reports scanned and free for everyone here on this call. Please use that. And then obviously other artifacts you can scan too, which is really kind of beneficial.
Yeah, it's and again, just to follow on, like, looking at a lot of the new like Claude Mythos and things like that are great for code checking and for fixing and things like that. But you still need a separation of duties, right? All of us who've taken the Security Plus class know that we need to talk about separation of duties. And, you do need something at the end to check this. So you can check the software you're buying, you can check the software that you've made, um, and you can, have a completely separate sort of, check to ensure that you're just not, agreeing with yourself. And so, this is a really helpful way to look at it. Say, there does need to be a third party or a secondary check at the end. Good.
Oh, 100%.
Okay.
Yeah. So kind of highlighting some of the why binary analysis is coming more to the forefront, right? So Gartner just recently published a CISO playbook for commercial software. Great read. Basically, the cool things about it, right, is it validates supplier provided SBOMs, right? They want you to detect malware, tampering, embedded risks, identify cryptography and expose secrets, and make definitive and defensible software onboarding decisions. All of kind of which what we're talking about today and how binary analysis enables these.
Okay.
So basically, there's four main use cases for third-party software scanning, and we kind of view this as a kind of a walk, run, sprint kind of mentality, right? So most people, when they kind of onboard a new technology, they're like, "Oh man, I have so much software to scan," or "I have a backlog," right? And so we kind of have this path for folks like who are coming into the space and just starting to use binary analysis. Basically, there's four main use cases, right? So the first one being new software, right? So basically, you start with what's coming in the door, right? And at least heading it off at the pass, right? So scanning new software acquired for risks, threats present, package prior to onboarding, right? So that's kind of that catching it before it gets deployed mentality. And then Stuart, if you want to build this out a little bit, we have existing software, right? So basically, most organizations have legacy software. We recently help the customer with a 90 terabyte backlog of legacy software get scanned, right? And make sure that that stuff is still good to be used, right? So this is stuff that they can pull down from whenever and use it, right? How do they know it's safe? I know that was previously approved, but now they can verify it, right? Again, with new up to date stuff. And then obviously software changes. So obviously packages will change over time, right? Someone will roll out a new update. Someone will roll out a new AI agent as part of their software package. How do you check that? You need to rescan it, check it for those new risks and those things introduced by the version change. And lastly, we have the emerging threats, right? So obviously, there's going to be things that are new that not everyone's going to be on board with right away. But once it's identified, you need to be able to retroactively scan your software for that vulnerability, right? For example, Shai Halud, definitely something to go back and, people trusted those software before. Now they realize that there was a worm in it, right? So the idea is to check for those emerging threats.
Thank you, Patrick.
Yep. But obviously today we're just going to be focusing on just one of these guys, which is the new software, right? Scanning newly acquired stuff, which is always kind of the first step for most folks. And if you want to hit the next slide for me, basically, why would you focus on new software? Right? One, it's a natural point of enforcement for existing processes, right? So it's the quickest route to value, right? So for example, you can actively see it work. You can actively block or prevent things from coming into your network and being deployed. And you can also then establish value by getting your security assessment down for those new software applications so that way they can be deployed faster. Additionally, opportunity for organizations to mitigate risks. And then obviously it's non-invasive, right? So it's not relying on software active in production. So you're not holding up the business, but you're actively being able to accelerate business by doing the security assessment up front and get that done faster. So what would this look like in theory? So we're going to talk about it from a perspective of if you have an ITSM or an IT service manager. So in this instance, we're going to talk about it from a ServiceNow perspective, since that's the biggest player in the space. You have ServiceNow, right? So we're going to talk about it from how this kind of plays out in terms of a process, right? So first, the software vendor, maybe they'll send you the software package, the security or engineer or AppSec team needs to do a security assessment. What they'll do is they'll run it through a binary analysis. And as Stuart kind of mentioned, you'll get a cool security assessment report, right? Reports on malware, tampering, vulnerabilities, hardening, secrets, licenses, and then it'll produce all those elements that you need for an SBOM/XBOM.
That would be like using Spectre Assure, right?
Exactly. Yes. So that would be using our Spectre Assure product. And then not only that, but you can have in our software solution the ability to set up approvals based on custom policies that you as your organization dictate, right? So for example, if you have a threshold of like, I just want bare minimum, I want to make sure that nothing has malware, right? That would be like a level 1, right? So you could have that policy in place to where you can actually run it in your ITSM to where it'll run in the background, check it against your policies, and then give you a pass-fail verdict, right? So in the instance that it's approved, great. That's awesome. That's exactly the kind of activity you want to see. And what happens after it gets approved? You send it off to procurement. They start deploying it or purchase it, right? Additionally, added benefit here, the procurement side, is if you do find stuff, you can use it in your software negotiations before you purchase it, right? So for example, this is a good point of leverage for you guys, like in the sense that you got this cool report, you can send it to that vendor and be like, hey, you have da-da-da-da issue, right? Like, how can we resolve this, right? So maybe you put some checks in place in your side, maybe you put some stuff in your contracts, et cetera, right? So that's pretty cool as well. And then eventually you deploy the software, right? So, you archive the safe report. So that was the next step, actually. So one of the cool things is you can archive these safe reports, save them, right, as a point in time, right? So also really good for audit protection, right? So when DORA or whoever the compliance speed will come knocking at your door, you'll have a good record proof of assessments that you did.
So Patrick, what is the safe report?
Oh, sorry. Safe report is what Spectre Assure basically produces when it scans a piece of software. So there's a few ways to view it. You can view it within our product itself, and then also you can export it, right? So there's different formats so you can export it in to where you can basically archive it as well.
Okay.
And then lastly, yay, it's approved, it's deployed. Your executive is happy that your new business application is up and running and saving the business X amount of dollars and granting X amount of efficiency.
Yeah. I'm sure a lot of people on this webinar look at this and go, no, the way we do it is we buy it. And then they say, could you look at it? Could you add it to your list of things to do?
Yep, that's true. Exactly. And then obviously in the result that there is a failure of the policy, right, or the safe report, the idea is you want to build it a couple times for me, Stuart?
Sure.
You can implement compensating controls, right? So basically, for example, maybe you can block some ports via your firewall. Maybe you can isolate it. You can do some things to protect yourself. And maybe you then decide to approve it because it's acceptable risk, right?
Yeah, that case, just share my own personal experience. I worked for an Air Force contractor, and we had software from the Air Force that we were required to use to do our billing. But when we actually analyzed it, it had issues. I know no one would believe that, but and we ended up actually putting it behind its own little firewall because we had to use it, otherwise we wouldn't get paid. But we had we had concerns about it being inside our software, inside our network. Yep. So yeah, you can see by compensating. There are a lot of reasons why you would actually deploy software that you're not comfortable with.
100%. And then also additionally, if you obviously you're doing this in the part of onboarding, right? there is the opportunity to send the safe report or the security assessment to the vendor, right? So maybe there's some things in there that you can't compensate for that you need corrected before you even deploy this or purchase it, right? So that's also very useful.
Yeah,
And then,
we actually had sorry.
yeah,
I was gonna say though, but we talk about this, so like we have people that call us up and say, "Hey, I got this thing called a safe report from one of my customers. How do I get this? How do I get this?" And then they end up actually becoming a Spectre Assure customer because
yeah,
they want this they wanted this report and they've been trying to get it internally for a long time, and then their vendor just emails it to them. One guy say this is going to be like in my this is what I'm going to present to my leadership and end of quarter as an accomplishment, and that's the thing I got in the email. You know,
yeah, there's like many ways this can be beneficial, right? From a vendor perspective, but then also from to protect yourself as an enterprise buyer as well.
yeah. And again, also the other thing is it's a very consistent report. So if I run it and then they send me the software back and say, "Oh no, we fixed all these things," I can run exactly the same test, exactly the same way. It doesn't matter if I did it or you did it, because you probably do it much better than I would. But whoever ran it would get the same result, and you'll be able to do apples to apples comparison between the two reports and look at that differential and say, well, there were 15 issues on the original scan, and on the second scan there are 17 issues. So, again, you'll be able to understand, is this vendor actually solving a problem? And if they're not, you need to um, look at your vendors. Again, a lot of this is not to say I'm going to fix my vendors' problems. It's to, a lot of it is to understand, do I have good vendors or bad vendors? Do I have people who do know how to run software or don't? And this actually gives you the receipts. You can go back and say, no, we have issues with you. Let's go through this. So again, it gives you a lot more power especially when dealing with, procurement and the people that want the software and all these other people to say, no, no, I have documentation and here's why we can't deploy this software, or here's why the vendor has to fix it before we can deploy it. And I know I'm sorry that screws up your Q3 strategy, but this is what, we can't just have a big hack and then be in the news again.
100%, right? And I mean, that's the key is that you're going from this kind of blind trust to verifiable proof, right?
Mhm.
And that's the key. That'll help you out in the long run.
Yeah.
And then obviously, just kind of going back to the flow state, obviously we know that there's some gray area, right? So maybe it has some dependencies that are kind of a little leery, like you're not sure you want to communicate with those things, but you still need to use the software, right? It's business critical. For example, maybe it's like your CRM or something like that. You need to register the risk and then approve it, right? So basically, it'll at least establish the paper trail that you're able to say, hey, we scanned the software, we saw these things, we notified everyone, we did our compensating controls, we're now registering the risk that it's here. That way, it can still move forward, but at least this way we have it all documented
Absolutely.
that you're doing your due diligence.
And,
Due
and, and
diligence.
and Patrick and I would like to share with you at this point that in no way do we think any of this is easy, right? This is really hard, and to get here and to look at this is a lot of work, and it's a slog, and it's a lot of challenging, and going to meetings and talking to people and working with people, but it is where you want to be. And again, continuing to deploy software that has problems and having to go back later and re-image 1,500 laptops is not the strategy going forward.
Exactly. So on the plus side, you can automate a lot of this. So for example, in ServiceNow, we've done it with many of our customers, and we'll talk about one of them shortly. Basically, you can offload your software request to a ticket by an end user for one. So no longer are you getting an email from some exec like, hey, we're purchasing the software. An employee will request it for you, and they will usually provide a download URL, right? So then it'll go to, in your ServiceNow workflow, right? It would go to your line manager. Your line manager can openly approve it or deny it right away. And say your line manager is like, okay, yes, this is approved. They'll get a ServiceNow ticket to approve it or deny it, right? If they approve it, it'll automatically be sent to ReversingLabs, where we will use the download URL, use it in our environment, do the analysis, and then send it back, right? So the benefit here is you don't have to have sandboxes, you don't have to set up pen testing, nothing, right? We'll download it for you and in our environment. Then the software will obviously be a test, right? So it'll either pass or fail based on your policies, right? So you set that all up once, then you're good. If it fails, what'll happen is then it'll communicate back with your ServiceNow or your ITSM, and then establish, hey, these are your tasks for remediation and your subject matter of issues, right? So it'll open up tickets depending on who it needs to go to. Maybe it's a contracting issue, so it needs to go to your contract team. Maybe it's a security issue. Maybe it needs to go to your security team, etc. Right? So it'll open up tickets automatically for you, and then it'll also allow for the option to be a risk approval, right? So for example, it'll maybe send this alert to this team. Is this something that you want to register? Is this something that you want to save or approve still or no? Right. So you can basically go no, reject the request, right? In terms from employee, or yes, approve it. So then you can assign it to installation. It'll link in your CI or request for CMDB. So the plus side is you get basically a quick pass, go or no go security assessment, right? Is the part. And then also it'll set up your ticketing requests to where it'll send the tickets to the folks that need to review things. And then obviously collect all that automatically and get you to your fastest deploy situation, right? Or not deploy situation. So it's really interesting and really quick way to do this. And then additionally, obviously, if you need more information or you need that, all the safe report and stuff is still available to you and you can still get to it within ServiceNow. But the benefit is that this quickly kind of does that volume of employee requests and that type of thing. It really expedites that, right? So we've seen organizations cut their security assessment time down from weeks down to hours, which is really kind of beneficial for organizations.
And it also comes back to helping understand like what software are people requesting,
Mm-hmm.
and also what groups are requesting. So if I'm actually you looking at this and saying, what am I going to focus on? What am I going to do? I can see, how much of my company is interested in something or not. If it's one person, if it's 1,000 people. So again, it's, really, really helpful at that point to be able to centralize this. But also, it's a straight point of deployment. They say, look, if it hasn't been approved, we can't buy it. That's just how it is.
Exactly.
And if going, to, being able to deal with procurement and other organizations and saying, yeah, we can test it. Absolutely, we certainly can. When we will do that, but it has to be tested first. It has to be looked at. So again, being able to establish that line of control.
Yeah, exactly. So obviously, everyone wants to kind of know, well, who's done this before, how was it done, etc. Right? So recently, we've acquired a company, or not acquired a company, acquired a customer who's a global energy supplier. Sadly, I can't tell you who it is. But the idea is they were able to do end-to-end software assurance, and basically what they did is they basically tackled 2 or 3 of the use cases that we kind of mentioned earlier, right? So they did the new software onboarding use case, which we kind of talked about in depth. They're also doing existing software, and then also deep threat validation. And that's 3 different products from us, right? So the first one, the new software onboarding, which we talked about today, is Spectra Assure, right? So basically, they had a problem where they had trust without visibility, right? So for example, they're buying from those big names of software providers, right? So obviously, they're just going, I trust this place, right? But Spectra Assure basically allows them to then verify that, right? Give them that visibility. So they were able to basically give them pass fail at stage gates within their onboarding process, right? So it's baked into their process already. So reducing the amount of headache of setting up the process, which is nice. And then obviously the outcome is they get secure policy driven approvals, right? So they have a 200 plus policy that they set up for automating the pass fail, right? That they established with us. An existing software, right? So that existing software problem, right? So obviously there's the hidden risk in legacy software. As Stuart mentioned, I'm aware of a large grocery chain that was using Windows NT for way past its expiration date. So for example, making sure that they're scanning that legacy software and basically allowing them to detect the issues at scale with a Spectra detect. And then obviously this organization, I think I mentioned earlier, had 90 terabytes worth of legacy software that can be easily used and deployed by employees that they needed to scan, which is a big monolith project, especially when, EDR platforms typically have gigabyte caps on what they can scan. So for example, with our solution, you can scan up to 50 gigs file size, which is very generous and very enough for most packages, right? Where EDRs are typically like 2 gigs is usually where their max is. And then lastly, that deep threat validation, right? So obviously we are in a situation where, what are the real problems here, right? So maybe some things we'll identify and you're like not sure what the real risk is. This kind of Spectra Analyze really kind of provides that deep inspection, right? So they can basically look at it, review it, and say, okay, yes, this is actually a big problem or not, right? So then it'll allow them for fast, accurate verdicts. So yeah,
Thank you.
And then, well, obviously, if you guys want to read this case study, it is available. There's both the short form and a long form version of it. I encourage you guys to go read it.
So let's just finish up in a summary, right? So again, third-party breaches through commercial software on the rise. I don't think anybody would on this call or anybody would disagree with that. Traditional inherent trust-based models are no longer sufficient, right? Having the vendor send you a thing that said they had a SOC 2 audit 5 years ago is really not as helpful as it used to be. Binary analysis, being able to break up the code and examine it provides a very strong onboarding, control and being able to do things at scale. And being able to integrate this with your workflows, your ServiceNow, your Jira, however you're doing it, again, to accelerate new software onboarding and be able to put that control in the beginning, right? So you can't buy it if it wasn't approved. If it wasn't analyzed, it's, can't be on the buy list. And so that's a harsh rule, but that's where we've gotten to this point. And going back and having to fix everything later is just not possible. It's just becoming too challenging. And again, with all these breaches and everything happening, more and more often, the idea of controlling them at the beginning has got to be your main focus because again, it's getting out of control. We're starting to see these types of GitHub major breaches, major issues. If you follow ReversingLabs either on LinkedIn or Twitter, you see our research coming out. We see major breaches like every week now. And these are no longer like news. Like they're no longer that big a deal because they're just so common.
Yeah.
And again, extending software assurance into AI and ML. That's where we're also seeing this. We didn't talk a lot about this on this call. We're going to have a follow-on webinar really focused on AI and machine learning assurance and how that becomes its own kettle of fish.
Yeah, exactly right. I mean, one of the main proprietors of new software being acquired now is AI and ML, right? So that's going to be your most common software package going forward. So we understand that, that's going to be something that you guys are going to want to scan, and we have the capabilities to do that, right? Providing that AI ML bomb, right? Additionally, we're integrated with a company or an organization called Splix that can provide you all these really cool insights into model behavior, right? And it'll do testing on those models, right? So some really cool information that's available, and definitely encourage you, if you are curious about that, please reach out for sure.
And again, we'll be following up with a webinar here in the near future.
That lastly, I want to, I offer or extend the invite to everyone to go check out the Spectra Assure community. It's a really great way to kind of see our capabilities in action, but then also provide value for you guys immediately, but for free. So for example, you can check out our repository of, NPM, Ruby, you get VS Code, extensions, etc. All free open source stuff, right? We'll provide you kind of a baseline report for you so you can see like what the safety level and the security assessment is of those open source models. So definitely check those out, or those open source packages, sorry. Please check those out. It's a great way to kind of get your, jump into the shallow end or whatever and check out what, Spectra Assure could offer you guys just from an open source perspective. Additionally, our Spectra Assure community now does offer up to 10K or 100K lookups just for free. And then obviously, if you guys want to automate some processes for protecting your open source supply chain, right? So for example, a lot of developers are using our open source things in their code. It's a great way to kind of secure that with our open SpectraCert community kind of plus, right? It allows up for, I think it's 1 million lookups, which is really good. So you can basically do a lot with that. But I encourage you guys to go check it out. It's a really cool resource for sure.
Yeah, one of the nice things about it is you do not have to log in. So if you're on our
Mhm.
one of our federal friends, or you're concerned about audit or whatever, you do not have to log in. It's open that way, and it's a great way for education. You can use it to understand examining packages, and it gives you a lot of educational information to help you if you're learning about this or you're just getting up to speed. And it's also a great way to show within your organization, be able to say, I've been meeting with your team or your leadership to say, we submitted this PyPy package and let me show you what we saw, and so it's really helpful. And I think a lot of people should be really taking advantage of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. All right. And then obviously just want to promote some relevant resources for you. We have a various assortment of white papers, solutions, briefs, and then obviously that CSAIL playbook from Gardner. Definitely great resource to check out. We also have those case studies that we mentioned. Additionally, there's some additional ones that also kind of do the same use case, right? Of how do they accelerate the software onboarding approvals, right, with faster security assessments. We have an example of a global bank doing it. We have an example of biotech company doing it and Canadian government. So definitely check those out. And additionally to that, global energy supplier as well. And there, I believe it looks like there's a link in the chat for that. So if you guys want to check that out as well.
Okay. So we've come to the end, and we'd like to ask for questions. I didn't see any questions in the chat during the call, but if you have any questions at this point or any comments or anything you'd like to share, we'd be happy to see that.
Yeah.
Okay. From Nate, any limits on binary analysis, file size, file type, etc.
Yeah. So file size limits for binary analysis, we can support up to 50 gigs. File type, I don't know all the file types. We do support a wide variety of them. I can get you some resources on that going forward. But yeah, we accept a wide variety of file types. On the plus side, we just recently unveiled capability. Like, for example, if you want to submit just a URL for the download, we will download it for you. So typically, we will support everything that kind of supports on that side of the house as well.
I can actually answer that question. We support 4,800 file types at this point,
There we go. Oh,
which is
so many.
well, again, and Spectre Detect can actually take a file up to 100 gig.
Oh, even better.
Even better. Yeah, but I mean, that's, and then we can also unpack like 50 different types of compression. So again, typically the idea being that if you submit something to us, you should get a verdict back 99.8% of the time. And it should never be because it was too big or you didn't know what type of file it was or you couldn't decompress it.
Awesome.
Okay. Thank you. But it's a great question.
Yeah.
Okay. Were there any other questions or?
Uh, that looks like it's it. But
Okay.
as we kind of mentioned before, if you guys have any questions that maybe you're not comfortable asking in this setting, please reach out. If you want to reach Stuart or myself, even you can. It's just our first and last name with a dot in between them, and then followed up with a at reversinglabs.com. Feel free to hit us up. We'll happily answer your questions offline. And then if we don't have the answers, we can definitely get you in touch with folks that can get you the answers. But yeah, we appreciate everyone's time here, and look forward to hopefully hearing from you guys in the future.
And again, keep fighting the good fight. We know, this is hard, right? Trying to, bring this into your organization. A lot of times a lot of people we talk to, are, literally trying to educate their people, their own, spending more time trying to educate their own leadership, trying to educate their own teams, working with development teams who are, quite honestly, sometimes not interested. And so, again, we know this is the good fight. But again, you just got to keep your head down and keep focused because, coming back and saying, okay, well, I guess we're gonna have to re-image everybody's laptop now. Did we do that Friday? Yeah, we did that Friday. Anyway, so again, thank you very much, and we really appreciate everyone being here. So have a great day and have a great rest of the week.